The words fell like a guillotine, clean and final. "I will marry her instead," the vampire king said. And in that instant, the groom understood the truth. This wedding was never a union. It was a reckoning, centuries old, sharpened by blood and love. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining. Take a moment to say hello in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. We're glad you're here. The first thing Vivian Graves noticed was the silence. Not the polite hush of an audience awaiting vows, but the deeper, heavier quiet that pressed against the ears, as if the world itself were holding its breath. The plantation hall stood drenched in candlelight, its white columns wrapped in ivy and iron sigils, its windows shuttered against the storm rolling in from Mississippi. Outside, thunder growled low, patient like something alive. Vivian stood at the altar in ivory silk, her gloved hands folded, her pulse steady despite the weight of 1,000 eyes. She was expected to be trembling. She was expected to be overwhelmed. She was expected to be happy. She was none of those things. Across from her stood Thomas Caldwell, immaculate in his tailored suit, his family crest pinned near his heart. He looked every inch the groom of a historic union, wealthy, powerful, groomed for leadership. Yet there was a tightness to his smile, a sharp vigilance in his gaze that betrayed his confidence. Thomas had grown up knowing monsters were real, even if the rest of America pretended otherwise. His family had helped write the laws that kept them hidden. This marriage was supposed to finish the job. 300 years of shadow war between humans and the Nightborn had ended on paper, but not in spirit. The treaty demanded symbols, and symbols demanded sacrifice. Vivian, daughter of Senator Margaret Graves, was that sacrifice. A human bride offered to a political dynasty that had brokered peace by controlling both sides. No one had told Vivian the full truth when she agreed. They called it duty. They called it legacy. They called it love for her country. They did not call it what it was, a cage lined with flowers. The officiant cleared his throat and began to speak, his voice echoing beneath the vaulted ceiling. Vivian listened without hearing, her thoughts drifting to the bayou beyond the hall, to the smell of wet earth and moss, to the memory she never spoke aloud. Water rising, darkness swallowing streets, a pair of red eyes cutting through the storm. She felt him before she saw him. The candles nearest the entrance guttered, their flames bending inward as if bowing. A cold sweetness filled the air, like rain striking old stone. Soldiers lining the walls stiffened, fingers tightening on rifles etched with prayers they barely believed in. Then he stepped forward. Lucien Nocturne did not look like a monster. He did not look like a king. He wore black simply, his coat unadorned, his pale hair pulled back at his nape. His face was sharp and calm, carved by time rather than age, his crimson eyes steady as they swept the room. Every ward carved into the hall shuddered, recognizing something older than itself. The officiant faltered. Thomas went rigid. Vivian's breath caught, not in fear, but in recognition so deep it hurt. Lucien stopped a few steps from the altar. He did not bow. He did not smile. His presence alone bent the room around him, drawing history into a single point. "I was not invited," he said quietly, his voice carrying without effort. "But this concerns me." A murmur rippled through the hall. Senator Graves half rose from her seat, her face drained of color. She had signed the treaty clause decades ago, her signature pressed into ink she believed harmless. A relic, a myth. Lucien's gaze found hers, then shifted to Vivian. "You remember," he said, not as a question. Vivian nodded once. She remembered strong arms lifting her from floodwater. She remembered a voice whispering her name when no one else knew where she was. She remembered warmth in the middle of ruin. Thomas stepped forward sharply. "This is a human ceremony," he snapped. "You have no standing here." Lucien's eyes flicked to him, and the groom paled as if blood itself had fled his body. "I have every standing," Lucien replied. "By right of blood, by right of promise." The words landed like stone. The officiant stammered, fumbling through parchment. The clause emerged, brittle with age, written in Latin few present could still read. "Any royal of the night, may claim the hand of one whose bloodline owes them life. The hall seemed to lean inward as the truth surfaced. Vivian felt something loosen inside her chest. Not fear, not relief. Choice. I will marry her instead, Lucian said. Thomas staggered back. He understood now that this was not theft but correction. His family's power, his future, his carefully constructed righteousness. All of it built on the assumption that the Vampire King was gone. Dead legends could not claim brides. Vivian lifted her veil. She stepped forward. In that moment, something ancient and cruel cracked. The system that traded daughters for peace. The lie that monsters were only those born in darkness. If you believe that power should never be built on silence and fear, this is the point where you choose a side. Would you stand with men like Thomas, who dress control up as order, or would you dare to believe in something truer? Comment what you think justice looks like. Only those who side with manipulation stay quiet. Lucian offered his hand. It was cool, steady, real. Vivian placed her palm in his. Thunder broke overhead, and the bayou answered, water stirring, history shifting. For the first time in her life, Vivian felt the future open instead of closing. And Thomas Caldwell, watching it all unravel, realized too late that love, once chosen freely, was the most dangerous power of all. The storm did not break when Vivian left the plantation hall. It followed. Rain sheeted down as Lucian led her through the open doors, past soldiers frozen between orders and instinct, past guests who stared as if witnessing a myth claw its way into flesh. Thunder rolled so close it rattled the ironwork, and the bayou air thickened with ozone and moss and something older. Magic unsettled, awakening. Outside, a black car waited where no car had been moments before. Its engine purred softly, alive in a way machines should not be. Lucian opened the door for her, an old-fashioned courtesy that made her chest ache unexpectedly. "Are you afraid?" he asked, not looking at her, as if the answer mattered enough to give privacy. Vivian considered the question honestly. Her heart was racing, but fear was not the word. "No," she said. "I think I finally understand why I always felt like I was walking towards something I couldn't see." Lucian nodded once, as if that confirmed something he had known for years. He closed the door and moved to the driver's side. The car pulled away just as shouts erupted behind them. Orders barked, phones raised, panic blooming too late. They drove into the Louisiana night, rain blurring the world into streaks of silver and black. The plantation lights vanished behind the curtain of trees, swallowed by cypress and shadow. Vivian watched it disappear without regret. "You don't have to stay," Lucian said after a long stretch of silence. "The claim gives me the right to ask, not to cage. If you wish to return, I will take you back before dawn." She turned toward him, studying the sharp line of his profile, the calm control that wrapped him like armor. "Would you have come if you thought I would say no?" "Yes," he answered immediately, "because the choice needed to be yours." That answer settled something deep inside her. They reached the river just as the storm began to thin. Mist curled over the Mississippi, luminous in the half-light, and a structure rose from its edge, an old river estate, half swallowed by vines, its windows glowing softly. Vivian felt at the moment they crossed the threshold of its grounds. The air hummed, tuned to Lucian's presence like a living instrument. "This is where I stay when I am in this part of the world," he said. Neutral ground, warded but not hidden. Inside, the house breathed history, wood darkened by time, walls lined with maps that shifted subtly when she wasn't looking, portraits whose eyes followed movement with quiet awareness. Lucian removed his coat and set it aside, suddenly less distant, more real. "You should rest," he said. "Tomorrow will be complicated." Vivian smiled faintly. "Tomorrow has been complicated my whole life." He watched her with an intensity that was not hunger but curiosity, as if she were a story he had waited centuries to read properly. "Thomas will not accept this," he said, "nor will the council that stands behind him." "Good," she replied. "Neither do I." Elsewhere, in a high-rise far from the bayou, Thomas Caldwell smashed a glass against the wall. His reflection fractured across the shards. Handsome, furious, humiliated. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from donors, generals, elders who had built their influence on the careful containment of monsters. They were supposed to obey, he snarled. He was supposed to be dead. An older man, seated calmly across from him, folded his hands. His eyes were too still, his smile too thin. Legends don't die, he said. They wait. And now the king has reminded everyone why we feared him. What do we do? Thomas demanded. The man leaned forward. We make sure the girl regrets her choice. Back at the river estate, Vivian stood on a balcony overlooking the water. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed raw and gleaming. Lucian joined her, 2 glasses of dark liquid in hand. To survival, he said softly. She clinked her glass against his. And to not being traded anymore. He studied her, something like relief flickering through his composure. You are braver than you know. She laughed quietly. You pulled a child out of flood and then waited years to give her a choice. I think we're even. For the first time, Lucian smiled. Not the sorrowful curve from the altar, but something warmer, realer. Then let us see what we become, he said. Downriver, unseen, currents shifted. Old alliances stirred. And somewhere in the dark, resentment sharpened into resolve. If you believe control and cruelty should never win, remember this moment. Stand against people like Thomas Caldwell, because silence is how monsters wearing human faces survive. Morning came slowly to the river estate, lights spilling through gauze curtains and glinting off the Mississippi like scattered silver. Vivian woke to birdsong and the low murmur of water, disoriented for one soft, fragile moment before memory returned. Candles, thunder, red eyes, a hand offered instead of a cage. She sat up, pressing her palm to her chest. Her heartbeat was steady, real. No dream lingered here. The room she had been given felt lived in, but untouched, as if it existed for moments exactly like this. Antique furniture polished smooth by time. Shelves of books written in languages she half recognized and others she didn't. And above the mantel, a single painting of a city drowning beneath storm clouds. New Orleans. She stepped closer and noticed a small figure on a rooftop, arms outstretched, defiant against the flood. You kept that, she murmured. I did. Lucian stood in the doorway, immaculate as ever, though his eyes held a shadow she hadn't seen before. Not exhaustion, something heavier. Anticipation. They're moving already, he said. Thomas and his allies. They'll try law first. When that fails, they'll reach for teeth. Vivian turned to face him fully. Then teach me how not to bleed. Something like pride flickered across his face. Come, he said. There's much you should know. They walked the grounds together, past wards woven into iron gates and old oaks whose roots pulsed faintly with magic. Lucian spoke not like a king delivering decrees, but like a man confessing truths long held close. The night isn't united, he explained. It never has been. Clans, courts, families, some want peace, others want dominion. The treaty ended open war, but it also froze injustice in place. Humans kept power. We accepted shadows. Until now, Vivian said. Yes, Lucian replied. Until you. Inside the main hall, a long table was already occupied. Men and women, some human, some unmistakably not, looked up as they entered. Eyes gleamed gold, silver, obsidian. A woman with hair like spilled ink smiled knowingly. So this is her, she said. The one who made Caldwell choke on his own certainty. Vivian met their gazes without flinching. I didn't come to start a war, she said evenly. But I won't end myself to keep a lie alive. A murmur rippled through the room. Approval, curiosity, hope. From a screen mounted discreetly on the far wall, a news broadcast played. Thomas Caldwell stood at a podium, composed once more, outrage carefully tailored into statesmanship. This is an abduction, he declared, a dangerous supernatural overreach. We urge calm, but we will pursue all necessary measures to protect human sovereignty. Vivian felt anger rise, not hot but sharp. He's turning me into a symbol, she said. Again, Lucian's voice dropped, lethal and calm. He always was. The question is whether you allow it. She straightened. No, I want to speak. Publicly. The room went still. That will make you a target, someone hissed. Vivian nodded. I already am. Lucien studied her for a long moment, then inclined his head. Then we do this properly. That evening, as the sun bled red across the river, cameras flickered to life across the country. Vivian Graves appeared on screen beside Lucien Nocturne, not as a captive, not as a bride hidden away, but as a woman standing by choice. I was not taken, she said clearly. I was offered the truth, and I chose it. Social media ignited. Support clashed with outrage. Old fears clawed their way into daylight. And in the comments, lines were drawn. If you believe women are not bargaining chips and fear should never rule, say it. Speak it. Don't side with men like Thomas Caldwell, who mistake control for order. Silence is agreement, and only those who benefit from injustice stay quiet. In his penthouse, Thomas watched the broadcast end. His jaw tightened, fury curdling into something colder. Then we stop pretending, he said softly. If she wants to be a symbol, we'll make her a warning. He turned to the man in the shadows behind him. Release the hunters. Back at the river estate, Vivian felt it. A ripple of danger, distant but real. Lucien placed a hand over hers, steady and warm. They're coming, he said. She laced her fingers through his. Then let them see what happens when the night chooses love over fear. The river surged below, dark and unstoppable, carrying the promise of reckoning toward the sea. Night fell with intention. The hunters came at dusk, when the river turned black and the cicadas screamed loud enough to hide footsteps. They crossed the wards believing technology and arrogance could outpace old magic. They were wrong. The estate felt them immediately. Iron gates humming, roots tightening beneath the soil, the air sharpening as if the world itself drew a blade. Vivian stood at the center balcony, dressed not in silk but in dark linen, her hair bound back, her spine straight. Fear fluttered at the edges of her thoughts, but did not own her. She had spent her life being positioned, arranged, softened. Tonight, she was none of those things. They're testing the perimeter, Lucien said beside her. His voice was calm, but the night bent toward him, listening. Thomas wants proof. He wants footage. He wants you afraid. Vivian exhaled slowly. Then let's disappoint him. Below, the first ward shattered with a sound like glass breaking underwater. Armed figures surged forward, faces masked, weapons gleaming with sigils stolen from older grimoires. Men paid to believe they were righteous. Lucien stepped forward, crimson eyes igniting. Stay behind me. No, Vivian said gently, and took his hand instead. Stand with me. For a fraction of a second, history wavered. Then Lucien nodded. The night exploded into motion. Shadows rose like living things, wrapping hunters in fear before claws ever touched them. The river surged, water climbing its banks in defiance of gravity, cutting off retreat. Lucien moved like a storm given form, precise, devastating, merciful only where mercy taught a lesson. He disarmed, incapacitated, shattered resolve without indulging slaughter. This was not vengeance. This was warning. Vivian raised her voice, clear and ringing. Enough. The word carried. Magic listened. The remaining hunters froze, weapons clattering to the ground as the truth hit them. Not monsters, not chaos, but consequence. Cameras lay scattered in the mud, feeds already disrupted by forces older than satellites. Far away, in a glass tower overlooking a sanitized city, Thomas Caldwell watched screens go dark one by one. His allies shouted, demanded escalation, begged for control. Thomas felt something unfamiliar twist in his chest. Loss. They won't submit, someone said. Thomas stared at his reflection in the blackened screen. For the first time, he looked small. No, he whispered. They won't. Back at the estate, dawn bled into the sky, pale and quiet after violence spent itself. The hunters were gone, alive, terrified, carrying stories that would rot Thomas's narrative from the inside out. Vivian stood on the riverbank, Lucien's coat around her shoulders. The water had receded, calm once more, as if satisfied. You could have ruled with fear, she said softly. They expected it. Lucian watched the horizon. Fear is loud, he replied. Love lasts longer. She turned to him, heart full and aching. What happens now? Now, he said, meeting her gaze, we rebuild the treaty. Together. No clauses hidden. No debts disguised as destiny. Vivian smiled, bright and fierce. Good. I intend to change everything. News broke before noon. Thomas Caldwell resigned by nightfall, his coalition fracturing under public scrutiny and the quiet testimonies of men who had seen the dark and survived it. Across the country, people argued, hoped, listened. The old story was dying. At sunset, beneath the same sky that once thundered in judgment, Vivian and Lucian stood by the river. No audience, no chains, just choice. Ask me again, she said. Lucian took her hands, reverent. Vivian Graves, will you marry me? Not by blood or promise, but because you wish to walk beside me? She laughed, eyes shining. Yes, I will. The river shimmered. The night sighed. And history finally stepped aside. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. It really means a lot that you spent some time here with me today. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, drop a comment, or share it with someone who might enjoy it too. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. I love hearing from you. So let me know your thoughts, questions, or just say hi in the comments. Thanks again. You're the reason I do this, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.